Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to start off the presentation, and as Sarah referenced, Rob and I will kind of tag team. We received about 12 broad topics and a variety of questions that we're preparing our remarks and overview, and then as Sarah referenced, we'll try to answer some additional questions as they came in. Some of you may have been on the call 2 months ago. I spoke to this group on May 14th. On one of your monthly get-togethers, and just reflecting back at that point, I was, I think, introducing myself, giving an overview of my position, the focus, and really, as Sarah was referencing, using some of my kind of comments of triaging and really responding to the business closures where we were at. At that point, I gave an update that we'd organized a business advisory task force with the mayor. We had formatted some recommendations, which were just in the early stages of council review, but not formally adopted. So that was May 14th. Council adopted an emergency economic recovery ordinance the following week, and Rob and his team immediately responded within 48 hours of notice. The closure of State Street on May 22nd, which was Memorial Day weekend, to really just create a public pedestrian promenade to allow social distancing and spacing, with also the intent to allow food service restaurants to establish temporary outdoor dining operations on State Street. And similarly, that ordinance allowed outdoor dining throughout the city in a variety of locations, be it on private parking areas, common open spaces on within strip malls or private property, as well as within public right-of-way where feasible. And so I gave highlights to that, but we were just in the early stages of just getting the concept defined for council ratification. So obviously, council did ratify it. It's in effect. I think you all have probably seen and or experienced to really great success that it's been, both for State Street and downtown, but ultimately for so many of our over 400 food service businesses throughout the community reopening and trying to recover. And so I think that's been successful. And now we've seen the most recent, we were progressing through the stages of reopening from May through the summer, and then we all now can reflect back and see, what's transpired. The public health pandemic conditions continue. So the governor and county public health officer recently, as of July 14th, restricted a number of indoor business activities. Indoor dining was restricted, personal care services, gyms, fitness, et cetera, kind of go down through the list. But the beauty of this economic recovery ordinance, the city attorney helped craft, and we advised, broadened and allowed commercial outdoor activity for a wide range. Many businesses, that's not a feasible operation, but some businesses it is, and we are now seeing personal care service businesses take advantage of that opportunity. So you may see some barbers and salons and even some nail salons take advantage and set up outdoor operations, because they're effectively closed for having indoor business operations and for the foreseeable future. We don't know how long this will last. So fortunately, there are a number of businesses that are able to take advantage. Unfortunately, there are some businesses that can't take advantage just due to their location and proximity not having substantive open space. And so we're working and responding diligently to all the questions and concerns. Just reflecting on my notes here. And as such, this economic recovery ordinance, when established, had a sunset date of September 8th. Again, not knowing the public health conditions and what we were foreseeing, we projected out and established just over a 3-month period. So it was adopted on May 19th. We had a sunset date of September 8th, which is the Tuesday following Labor Day weekend. Recognizing where we're at currently, I'm preparing a recommendation going to the council here in just 2 weeks, August 11th, to modify the term of that recovery ordinance to extend that out for another 3 months and then have an option for an additional 3-month extension if the public health conditions are warranted. So we're continuing to respond and address the needs of the business community and in this pandemic, try to sustain our economy and sustain as many businesses in operation. Unfortunately, we have seen a number of businesses close, you know, via corporate restructuring, scaling back, the large businesses such as Nordstrom's, closing a number of stores, Coffee Bean, a number of corporate chains, as well as, you know, local independents as well. So it's, you know, I don't think we know the impact that this pandemic has had yet. We're still in process, but we're you know, looking to do everything we can to support business operations during this time. So that's just a broad overview to recap where we've been, where we're at currently in our efforts. We'll drill down in some more specifics, but I just wanted to kind of set the table with that. And with this, I'll transition to Rob, who can really speak to our efforts specifically in downtown and State Street with creating the pedestrian promenade and all the other street variations, because we've been working, again, throughout the city. Downtown's kind of taken the bulk of attention, but Rob and his team have been busy throughout the city. All you, Rob.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for coming at the right moment. We needed you. So boy, this has been a wild ride. I think we're on week 10. It feels like 10 years. But talk about craziness. I'm sharing my screen. Someone give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Okay. Yeah, this is kind of where it started in the COVID mess. State Street was complete, you know, derelict of just about anything. What we were seeing on the street is businesses closed, and then all of a sudden we're open up State Street, do something about it. And so, you know, this is day one. This is the Friday we closed the street. We're moving donated palm trees onto the street to try to like get the temporariness of it to have some sort of beauty, which is now, when you look back at it, it's like, man, those are schleppy palm trees. Can we please do something about the schleppy palm trees? Which we're thinking about. How do we do that? How do we go to a more permanent temporary? Is that the right word, Jason? Yeah, this is the Friday working with business owners on the spot, on the 500 block, a lot of restaurateurs in this meeting. How do we do this? Like, this is live. Like, how do we do this? And let's get together and talk about it. And then to have them kind of agree with where we should go, and then you know, then having something happen. So this is Friday at lunch, and Joe's moves onto the sidewalk. I mean, okay, something I think might happen. Cruisery coming out on the sidewalk, and Alexa skipped a happy hour. I mean, okay, will anyone show up to this? You know, Oscar Gutierrez on his new electric bike. He showed up for this, but will anyone else? Okay, so this is the Friday. This is like after like no one sees each other, COVID lockdown, and all of a sudden we have this movement on the street with kids, and it was kind of spectacular. This is still Friday. This is the first day, and I got to tell you, Jason and I were kind of like, is this really happening? Are people really showing up for this? And they did. This is the farmers market pivoted that next after the Memorial Day weekend. Can you move up? So they pivoted from the 500 block, and they moved up into the 600 and 700 blocks. Now, if you've been downtown, they are also in the 800 blocks now. So now they're in the 800 block. 3 blocks of farmers market, and Tuesday is actually pretty lively downtown now. As we were moving forward, we kept doing these guidelines. This is our State Street guidelines. I think we're on iteration 14. We just keep moving to the next rule as we go. So there's no pre-approval process to any of this. People call us on the phone and we say, hey, go do it. And then we go out in site and say, hey, move this over here, move that over there. Can you provide ADA? and then it seems to get done. So here's institutional, you know, the first smatterings of something actually happening on the street. Someone will actually put a railing and comply with ABC. Haldren's is in the background. They started putting out something. I'm going to go through this really fast because we could spend forever doing this. But it's just amazing how people responded. We had a closure that someone requested in front of Llama Dog. This is one car at a time on the other side of the street, which is working because this is kind of a cul-de-sac street so that they could start an operation. And that's been really successful. Back to Joe's, moving further and taking over the sidewalk. Other restaurants, this is Finney's, moving onto the street. They've since done a parklet on the other side now that the governor's gone back to full lockdown. Even paved a street, could be paved Coda Street during this time. And then all up and down the plaza, this is kind of the theme of what happened, kind of looking back on it is, we said, council, why don't you just close it all and have that be the palette and see who responds, see who comes out and actually takes over into the street. And so that's been what we've been trying to do. And as you've seen it evolve, if you have been down there, that's exactly what's happened. The only block that really couldn't go into the street was the 1300 block, which is Victoria to Sola. And we've since changed that. And then the 500 block, as you're probably very familiar with, this is a picture of it, just really coming out and becoming this new place. Really, it's a new place. And, you know, and speaking in terms of trying to call attention to what we may have stumbled onto in the name of COVID is really a new way of being downtown. Before, we had this issue of economy and really not this, we had this lack in Santa Barbara of this local experience. And what has happened in the 500 block, and I would propose to you for the Promenade or the Plaza, is that we now see each other in an unscheduled way. We see each other on the street. This happens to me almost every time I'm down there. We see someone we don't know, or we see someone we know, and then we feel a little bit more connected to the city. And I think that that's been pretty glorious. Getting on to just parklets really quick, we had this guide. Again, this guide is probably on its 15th iteration. But what's amazing is that this is our own guide. We've now replaced it with our own parklet examples. And the team has been phenomenal. The people who work at the city of Santa Barbara, just phenomenal to be pivoting and creating things essentially overnight. This was our first parklet. This is at Savoy. And they've really done a good job at trying to decorate them. And yes, they didn't go to HLC or ABR, but really trying to come to the, you know, even though they're temporary, to the tone of what we would expect to see in Santa Barbara. There are some safety things that they have to do, and not everyone does that. So we come back and do this. Is in front of the Blue Owl on Canna Perdido. This is actually one of the first ones, Foxtail on Coda. They've since expanded this one. Chase, a bar and grill on State Street. It's not a parklet situation, but they've been evolving now and kind of have this parklet thing. And then if you look, their restaurant is really from the building into the street and is really a lively area. Jill at Shell Hoops, or Jill's place, and her parklet, really nicely done. You can see some accessibility accommodations that people are getting into. Even on Anacapa, we had a parklet, little kitchen. So I'm just kind of going through some of these. But I would say Coast Village Road, it's pretty crazy what they've put out there. If you've seen there, I mean, just really gone all out on parklets. And they're just coming up everywhere. So I think, you know, what I would, you know, kind of pass it back to Jason, what I would say is that we've been able to, in a very, very short period of time, really stimulate these restaurants that we thought we were going to make them, you know, survive. Some of them thrive. Holdren's is doing better than they've ever done. and really been able to pivot. And I love the approval process for the parklet. You're probably going to be just confounded. This is the approval process. Follow the guidelines, take a picture after it's done, and email it to us. That's our approval process. So nimble and flexible has really ruled the day. And now I think the challenge for all of us is, now that we've seen this kind of new Santa Barbara local feel, how do we shape it into the future we want, where we can bring back State Street as our living room experience and our local experience that tourists visit, not the tourist area. So with that, I'll pass it back to Jason.
Thank you, Rob. It's one, extremely helpful to see all the imagery and the evolution, and Rob's so humble. All the staff he references of being so flexible. Rob's leading by example, and his creativity and vision is really an example for so many of us in the organization. The questions we received from you all touched upon a wide range of topics, a variety. Kind of, I would generalize in context to what I was hired to deliver for the city. So I'll just kind of touch upon what those questions were, and I'll go back and start to frame these out. So, a variety of questions regarding the status of Paso Nuevo, which I'll speak to. How are we addressing, the changing economy, diversification of economic interest in business? What's the status of hotel and tourism industry? What do we see coming down the pipeline? What about the revitalization of downtown Santa Barbara? So a variety of questions as such. And so kind of this section I'll speak to, and then Rob will kind of end our presentation with kind of the next substantive step that council's engaged in. They've formed a downtown committee, and we'll be working with 3 council members to evaluate State Street, but then, I think start teeing off on some of these larger existential questions. So I think just broadly in the context of the economy, we're clearly in uncharted territories. You all have seen the news, you've seen the economic statistics, the rate of unemployment, the kind of ongoing challenges to business activity, business closures, et cetera. It can go on, and we're not out of it. So at this point, we're in process. We don't quite know what the aftermath, what the impact will be. It's great to see the community respond to the street closures and the outdoor dining. I think we're so fortunate in Santa Barbara to have a climate and a locale that can facilitate this. But the overall economy is clearly under stress and duress. The challenges to the city's budget, which is predicated on economic activity and business revenues, is clearly under duress. The city had a very challenging budget. We were balanced, but we had to heavily utilize reserves to do so. So it's really critical. The 4th of July weekend, which was one of the first weekends that hotel were allowed to have leisure visitors, they reached a peak of just over 50% occupancy, and depending on, and that's also based upon many hotels not having full rooms available based upon the cleaning regimes they have, et cetera. So we're by far well under historic levels of tourism visitorship, hotel occupancy, and so that's going to be a substantive drag on our economy, because as much as we want to diversify and redirect our economy, we're still predicated on a tourism-based, service-based industry that's predicated on having tourists and visitors to the community. That's something we need to drive the community from and upskill our labor force and expand our employment base. But that's going to take a significant amount of time. So right now it's really trying to maintain the status quo and support business as much as is feasible. We've seen a number of substantive business closures. Probably the most impactful in relation to downtown. You have the combination of brick and mortar storefronts that will continue to see vacancies arise as businesses either close or just straight out not reopen. And that's a slow trickle down process. And then we've seen the notice of Nordstrom's closing a number of their department stores across the country, Santa Barbara being one of those. So now we have a very large general merchandise retailer that is going to become vacant. That is that's a building owned by Nordstrom's. It's on city-owned property, and they have a long-term ground lease, 45 years remaining approximately. And so they have contractual rights to occupy that. We've reached out to engage with them. They're keeping their cards close to their chest and not conveying what their intent is. I suspect they're probably looking for someone to take over their ground lease and sell their improvements and assign their ground lease. Nothing's formally come into the city, but it does require city review and approval because it is a contractual relationship. And then the other end of the block, Paso Nuevo being in the middle, which I'll speak to, is Macy's. Similarly, but not during pandemic, closure of that large department store. There, the difference there is it was improvements owned by Macy's, again on a long-term ground lease from the city. This was originally all a redevelopment project to assemble the property and facilitate these developments. Paso Nuevo, that's owned by a retail company, purchased the ground lease in Macy's improvements. And so they now have that property consolidated. They've been focused on the renovation of their middle section. Paso Nuevo sits in the middle between the Ortega building, the former Macy's, and Nordstrom's on the north end. And they're finishing up the $20 million renovation, should be completed here in the next month or so. And they've approached the city. The city's been in conversations with them for some time about an extension of their ground lease. And so that's taken the form of a development agreement as a contractual instrument to facilitate that. And that's proceeding to council. They submitted a development agreement application, so the city has an obligation as a regulatory body to review that. And so that's going before the Planning Commission here this coming month, and depending on the Planning Commission's actions, potentially on to council for consideration. They are conceptualizing a variety of ideas for reuse of the Macy's. They're strictly a retail mall owner, have a number of properties throughout the United States. But they've spoken of within other groups about repositioning that Macy's building, either converting it adaptive reuse to residential, maybe hospitality hotel use. They've even conceptualized entertainment uses prior to pandemic with an IMAX theater and some other uses. That's probably in question because movie theaters haven't. I think they were able to reopen for like a week or two before they were shut back down. So that's clearly all in question mark. But that's a very significant large retail square footage in the heart of downtown that has two major question marks. And so I think the time will tell, one, how some of this plays out from an ownership standpoint and what proposals and concepts come forward to the city for consideration and the economic viability and state of overall economy. Right now I think capital is somewhat frozen as people reevaluate these kind of commercial opportunities and really where is the viability for business activity. And so that's kind of addressing the one question that came forward of Paso Nuevo, Macy's, Nordstrom's, et cetera. Overall, I think to the context of economic diversity, revitalization of downtown, et cetera, these are some really large, major questions that we do need to answer, define a vision, an economic development plan to pursue. So we put time, effort, thoughtfully into what the future is. But I think that's somewhat secondary to the core mission and issue that we spoke of, which is the focus to State Street, the creation of this temporary promenade that's predicated on this emergency ordinance. We're in this period, and Rob mentioned it, this was all temporary. We did not know when we put this into effect the length of duration. I spoke earlier of time, carrying it through the summer. At this point, it's hard to tell, but it feels like summer may roll into fall. And so I've been using the vernacular of we initiate it with temporary conditions. We're now moving into interim conditions. And as such, the council's responded and has created a committee of 3 council members, Oscar Gutierrez, Megan Harmon, and Kristen Snedden. We're actually having our first meeting this Thursday, just to kind of bring that body into formation and begin the process, which will be a series of public meetings through this committee to ultimately focus on this downtown State Street closure. Their focus is to develop a recommendation that would go to the council as to what and how to treat this temporary condition, and should we evaluate and pursue a permanent condition of the closure. We've gotten very positive feedback as to the condition that's been created, and but we do have a lot of process to go forward. There's CEQA analysis, there's some regulatory steps, et cetera, and ultimately it takes a formal council policy action to begin all of that. So this committee is going to begin that process, and it works well timing, because while we're in this temporary / interim period, we can begin this early stage planning and process so that when there is a determination, we can just transition right into that. And so with this comment, I'll transition back to Rob, who's really going to be pivotal in facilitating this discussion with this downtown council committee. He's a great planning visionary, and I look forward to participating in that effort with him. So Rob, if you could touch upon that, and then I'll think we'll transition in those remarks into taking any additional comments and questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. So I'll just be really brief, but I think the challenge for Santa Barbarans is this next season of what is the future of State Street, and why does State Street exist? What is State Street's purpose? And it's really interesting if you think about it. And I've been here now almost 30 years, so I'm beginning to get a feel for Santa Barbara. Some of you yeah. I remember a season where, when I first got here, that if you came to the dais at city councils and you gave your comment, if you didn't say hi, my name is John Doe, and I've been at the city of Santa Barbara I've lived in the city of Santa Barbara for X years. If it wasn't more than 15, the council would summarily just roll their eyes like, who are you? And so it's kind of like this thought about who we are as a city, and who do we want to be, and how do we recapture the street. And I think we've gotten a lot of clues with what has happened. But what I would just put in your minds is what do you think is the purpose of this street? What do we want as a community for this street how does it serve? And I think that is the question we're going to put before this subcommittee of 3 people, council members, and then come back to council maybe with an approval of that purpose statement, because whatever the purpose of the street is, that will instruct the design and how we move forward in the future. So I actually have a hope and a belief that Santa Barbarans, actually there's a lot of agreement on the purpose of State Street. And just some of the things that I think about is it's a place where we see each other. It's a place where we do life. It's a place where we celebrate. And I think it's a place where we feel most alive, and where Santa Barbara begins to get some of its definitions in terms of how we do life. And so I will just share my screen one last time and just show you. This has been where I've been spending my off time, still at work on the 500 block. Just imagining, and I would just ask you to do that and be sharing with one another just this question: what is the purpose of this street? And I will say, I don't know if you know that Dan Buettner is a member of our community. He moved here recently. He's kind of a rock star in the National Geographic world. He invented the Blue Zone, which are the places that are most lived on planet Earth. And I was on a bike ride with him on Romero Canyon on Sunday and talked to him about this question of the purpose of State Street. And I shared with him how alive it felt to see people I know for the first time in a probably a decade and a half. I constantly am seeing people I know. And he said, you know, Rob, that is the #1 leading statistic for longevity. It's actually better than exercise. It's better than all these other things you can do for your body. Is that if a community sees it's each other on a regular basis in an unscheduled way, and they're constantly running into each other, that actually is one of the best promotions of longevity in life. So I would just leave that thought and that let it rest with you in the questions that you asked, because I think that we're at a very pivotal moment in our city where the things we decide next are going to be living on for generations about how we redesign and purpose this street. So I'll pass it back over to Jason or the moderator.
Are you ready for some of the questions?
I'm just going to stop sharing.
Great. So one of the questions came in before your presentation, and Jason, I think you addressed it, but I'm hoping we can get a little bit more detail. The question came from one of our members asking about the Nordstrom and/or Macy's space, and they asked whether an IKEA would be something that the city would consider. So I think, Jason, from your remarks, and I'm hoping that I understand it correctly, and I wonder if you can give us a little more detail. It sounds like because Nordstrom has that lease that they will take the first round, if you will, of suggestions, and then if they have a tenant, that then it will go through city approval. Is it that sort of process?
Correct. Yeah, the Nordstrom's controls the building. They own the building. You know, the use has to meet the zoning, and there's it's under contract, and so there's some contractual provisions. But you're exactly right. They're controlling the end use. They haven't come to the city and said take it back, or you know, they I'm sure see that there's value in the improvements in the building and are probably interested in selling the building and looking for a tenant. And conceivably they could sell the building just to a developer that isn't a tenant, is just seeking to, you know, invest in the building, adaptively reuse the building, et cetera. So I think the range of potential uses, you know, are both limited, but also unlimited in the context of, you know, you could look at all sorts of adaptive reuses. We've thrown out a variety, but, you know, you could expand that. It could be senior living, it could be, you know, healthcare, it could be academic space. I mean, you just go on and on with the varieties. It's really probably as much of an economic viability condition of what would it take to adaptively reuse the building and modify it, because it's been built as a department store, and so it doesn't have really any windows. It's kind of just major floor plates, et cetera. So you're going to have to significantly modify the structure to put it into some other form of use.
And as our economic development manager for the city, is part of your role to proactively go out to companies like IKEA or other entities and see if there is an interest in coming to Santa Barbara, or is that not part of your
you know, economic development is defined uniquely to each community that I've worked in and participated in establishing an economic development plan, which I haven't gotten to because it's been triaging, trying to support the businesses we do have in operation and keep them and survive this pandemic. But ultimately, I will develop an economic development plan, and that would get both community feedback and then ultimately council endorsement. That would then establish, you know, the role and focus. So yes, there is in economic development, there is a component called business traction, where you develop a game plan and you pursue the types of employers and businesses that you're seeking and facilitate. We're obviously always here as kind of technical advisories and would facilitate any conversation that any investor or property owner is interested in their property, would engage our planning staff and building safety, et cetera, to go through all the various questions to evaluate the possibilities, requirements, conditions, so that folks have a full disclosure understanding. You all being in real estate know that quite well. It's what's the old axiom of you better disclose, you'll end up defending, right? So it's best to know as much about property conditions requirements on the front end.
Thank you. Looking at our questions that have come in, there are a lot of comments that are mostly very positive in support of the Promenade. There is one specific question about the Promenade that was, how is the downtown Promenade affecting finding parking and also safety?
That's a really good question, and it's a wrestling, not the parking part, but the safety part. On parking, I think that I think we're doing well. We've kept the cross streets open. The Victoria Street is an exception. Victoria West 0 block is now closed to try to help the public market out. But aside from that, the side streets are open. They cross State Street. They're open across State Street. And all the parking facilities are now being staffed because we do have enough demand downtown, except for the depot lot, which we're only staffing on the weekends because that seems to be the only time we're getting enough parkers to make money, which is the only reason we have them staffed is to make money, and then also to keep employees from capitalizing on customer parking. Regarding safety on State Street, very interesting discussion, and it's important for us to all think about this because in terms of bikes, State Street is the most popular place in Santa Barbara in terms of numbers to bicycle. It also, by happenstance, is the most likely place to get hurt on a bicycle. And now with the Promenade and the plaza closed to vehicles, it's now the safest place to ride. And it's also gotten a lot more popular. And then so we've had this conflict with pedestrians and cyclists, and the tip of the spear on that conflict is a new, really amazing group of young adolescents that love to do wheelies on their bikes, and they love to be on their wheelies as long as they can before they move out of the way while they're still doing a wheelie. It's amazing talent if you've seen it, but it can be extremely frightening if you're the person that's being dodged. And so we've got this conflict. And what I would just say is that we don't have an alternative route right now for a cyclist to go through. Just like any pedestrian, a person on a bike is coming to State Street to be on State Street. And then the other thing is that the cyclists represent, at sometimes, more than 50% of the activity on the street. One of the challenges with State Street is the breadth of time that it's active. So prior to COVID, it was about 12:30 to 6 is kind of your active time. That's not enough to actually support a closure. So as we evolve in the street, and think about it, we're going to have to design a street that's active from 6 a.m. to midnight to really get the success, so that when we all go there, we're like, oh, people are here. People want to see people. And cyclists, bicycle people, being able to bike down that street is going to be a very important way to keep it active at more times. So, but that is the conflict. What we've kind of gotten around to is, hey, if you're feeling uncomfortable as a pedestrian in the street with cyclists, the sidewalk is no cycling. I know that's been challenging because some people are cycling on the sidewalks, particularly in the farmers market, and we're trying to chase that down. But that's how we've been balancing it at this point. In fact, tonight the council is going to direct us to eliminate cycling in the 500 block. In other words, you have to walk your bike in the 500 block, and we're actually going to start enforcing that.
Thank you. So let's moving away from State Street for a minute. And I know this isn't strictly in your jurisdiction, but one of our attendees asked whether you have any information on the Biltmore or the Coral Casino.
Yeah, I've heard some rumors about Biltmore, but just that rumors, and Coral Casino have not heard anything specific. So I think that's kind of, some of these businesses are keeping their business decisions to themselves, as it were, and only announce when they've kind of made a final determination. I'd also say there's many businesses just kind of waiting to see what are the conditions of public operations. So, we keep having changes to business closures. July 14th was the most recent coming out from governor, and then, the county adopts those. And I'll just use this opportunity to give a plug, because we also get receipt of complaints about businesses not following the public protocols, et cetera. And some of those complaints I've seen notices about open houses, realtors having open houses. And so just remind this body that you all are also considered a business and have restrictions on your business activities, et cetera. So just be mindful of how you're conducting your operations to address the public health guidelines.
Thank you. One more question, and then unless anything new comes in, because a lot of the questions and comments really are about the promenade and whether seating will be allowed to remain. And it sounds like especially with the task force that's just newly formed, that a lot of those detailed questions are going to be the type of topics that you'll be working on with that group. Someone asked offline whether you're working in conjunction with the Local Association of Architects. They put out a survey asking a lot of similar questions along the lines of what you were saying, Rob, about the purpose for State Street and what we want it to serve. Are you working in conjunction with AIA on that?
We are, and they're engaged at that level in terms of State Street. The thing that the AIA is going to be really important about, and this is a coming conversation in terms of land use downtown, is we're moving away from density discussions to form-based discussions. In other words, don't tell me how many units I can have. Tell me how big of a building I can have. What's the appropriate size of a building? And so they're going to be helping us nail down a form throughout downtown, and which areas, which blocks lend themselves to larger or smaller buildings, and get the form right, and then release developers to say, hey, whatever you can fit in there, fine. All we are concerned about is the look and size and scale of it. But that has been the challenge for developers, is they really want to do smaller units, which we don't have a lot of smaller units. Just to give you an idea in size, because you're all really sensitive to buildings and selling them, is right now the size that you're most likely to see is an 800 square foot. 810 actually is the magic number for an apartment being built. And a lot of people want to build something in the micro unit style, which is more to the 400 to 600 square foot. And the reason for that is that if we can get that size, and doesn't, for most of us on the call, like for me, for one, I'm like, hey, I'm not living in that. The reason we would want to do that is then you get people who are living downtown, but then they don't have their living room is really going to be State Street. It's less going to be the unit where they're at. And we can get a higher population, just responding to some of the other comments on here, to activate State Street with the activity that is going to be needed in order for it to feel right for all of us.
Someone just asked the question of whether you can talk about the new single lane on Anacapa on the Upper East Streets.
Yeah, how many people have seen the new painting? Yeah, it's very interesting how we got there. We worked with the Upper East Side community and their association on that one. The challenge there is that Anacapa above Micheltrena and perhaps Santa Barbara Street also above Micheltrena, which will be our next ask of them. It's not enough traffic to warrant 2 lanes. And so what happens is people, I say people, us, we tend to drive a little fast on that street. And so the 1 lane is the answer to that. But at the same time, the city didn't want, we didn't want to stripe bike lanes, which is usually why we do, how we do going from 2 lanes to 1 is we put a bike lane on one side. You've all been on Bath and Castillo, Upper Chapala, which when that neighborhood wanted that bike lane, we put the bike lane in, not for the bike lane, we put that in because the Chapala residents wanted 1 lane. So this new style, it's a buffer on either side, not a bike lane, not to confuse anybody that, the city's going to take over with bike lanes everywhere. No, it's about safety. It's about slow and down in the neighborhood. It's about visibility at intersections. And also, guess what? Both sides of the street, when you're parking your car, you got a place to get in and out of your car. So it's kind of a better way to do it. It's slower. It's a Santa Barbara feel, and please email me with your feedback on that. It's new, but we do think it's promising as we see it striped. People are getting it, and we can already see that it's easier for people to cross the street in the upper east side neighborhood because there's more visibility. The car is in the middle of the street. You don't get the double threat where one car stops and then the pedestrian's crossing and the other one almost hits them or hits them. So we do think it's going to be a Santa Barbara way to go, and I haven't seen that. This is a new Santa Barbara style. We haven't seen that anywhere else in the nation.
There's a lot happening in Santa Barbara that we would say is new Santa Barbara style, right? I was asked a question offline, and I think I know what they mean, but I'm going to ask both of you, and I think it might require a little speculation. But the question is, can you tell us what you think about the future of all of our wonderful parades? So I think the person is referencing with State Street looking the way it does now, and assuming that we're able to gather at some point in the future, if we were to keep State Street how it is, can you speculate on how we would be able to have the solstice parade or the holiday parade?
Wow. Yeah. So this is, and maybe Jason has some insights on this too, but this is, someone also mentioned on the questions, haven't we been talking about this for 3 decades? And the answer is yes. And then when people say close State Street, I go, did anyone think about the parade? Which are kind of the staples. I mean, solstice on one side of summer, fiesta on the other. It's kind of what we do. Some people vacation. My family for a season just said, hey, it's just fiesta. That's when we're not here. But yeah, what do we do? So I think that this is going to be a part of our why statement, right? This is our purpose. We need to really nail this as a community. What is State Street going to be? And I can't imagine that celebration is going to be off the table. I think it's on the table. I think we might be transitioning how the parade looks and feels on State Street. And how does it get narrower, for instance? Does the party, so to speak, or the celebration shift to something different? But I think that if we keep the why statement first, the technical aspects of how we design and implement will become easier because we will have agreed at a purposeful level as a community. Great question.
We're getting a couple of other different questions coming in, again, moving away from State Street, but someone's asking whether you have any update on the 1,000 Steps project or the Mesa crosswalks.
Well, I can't speak to 1,000 Steps. Well, I probably can because I think that we're in a world of hurt financially and we're not going to be doing that anytime soon. So there. And the Mesa crosswalks, I think that we're talking about the Cliff Drive, the Mesa. We did well, actually, ever since we took over from Caltrans, the Route 225 on Cliff. We've had an ongoing discussion with the Mesa neighborhood about Cliff, taking it from the Caltrans highway to the Santa Barbara style street. And we actually are about to submit an application with the state of California. It's a steep ask. It's $25 million transformative project to create a multi-purpose path, kind of like the Beachway on one side of the street on the ocean side of Cliff, that would run from the roundabout connecting to the other path. We're doing a groundbreaking for Las Positas Valley multi-purpose path tomorrow with council. We connect from the roundabout all the way across the Mesa and all the way down to Castillo, believe it or not, connecting the Lower West Side and McKinley and Monroe, all the schools. I mean, it would just be glorious for the community. And then we don't know if we'll get that. We think that we're going to score very high in the state of California to get that. Santa Barbara is the highest winning grant earner per capita in California. We've gotten $40 million since the cycle started 11 years ago, and we're submitting $80 million worth of grants next in 3 weeks. We'll be submitting $80 million. One project for Milpas transformation, Cliff transformation. There's a West Side transformation and an Upper De La Vina pedestrian crossing project. We're pretty sure we're going to get the De La Vina project. We're confident we're going to get the West Side project. Uncertain about the Cliff, and I think the least likely is the Milpas project, but a lot of good things happening.
Rob, I think you just, if anyone thought we were only talking about State Street, I think you've just touched on just about every other neighborhood in town with that one. So it sounds like money's going to rain down from the sky and we're going to fix it all. One more question here, and I think I know the answer, but I want to pose it to you both. One person is saying that they understand that a lot of the businesses on State Street that folded were due to high rents, and asking whether that's part of the reason that Macy's and Nordstrom's are gone. I don't think that's the case, but do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I can respond. I think there's two actual questions there. Macy's and Nordstrom's, they own their improvements, so wasn't a rent. They made their capital investment. I think they just saw a decline in shoppers, a decline in brick and mortar retail sales, and that somewhat responds to the second part of the question, which is rents and the rest of the retail, smaller retailers on State Street who are paying rents. Rents are shifting, obviously, but for many operators, a shifting rent obligation when there's little to no business, or they can't even operate their business depending on the type of business that they're operating, is a bit of an existential dilemma. I think this pandemic's also, you all have seen and experienced, businesses have either stepped up, pivoted, and shifted operations to respond to the public health requirements, gone online, they've conducted a number of operations. Others just said, this is not what I signed up to be at whatever point in their business plan, and are just, closing their business, not wanting to deal with the uncertainty and the new investment and the changes. So we're seeing, I made this analogy that, State Street prior to pandemic was already suffering. We know from studies and evaluations that this community is overbuilt with retail. The United States is overbuilt in retail overall. And we were seeing a decline in brick and mortar retail. We were seeing a decline in tourism visitorship to downtown, et cetera. And so we were, in a slow decline. And this is historic in downtowns and in areas, even of course, kind of historic for Santa Barbara, to see a pendulum swing of downtown being active and energetic, and then going into a period of malaise. And so, the pendulum was swinging pre-pandemic to downtown. Was one of the reasons I was brought in to assist. But my analogy on this is, there was a big Band-Aid on the retail in downtown. This pandemic just ripped that Band-Aid right off. And it's going to result in a substantive amount of vacancy and a number of business closures. We're already in the process of seeing that play out. It's devastating. It's heartbreaking to see so many operators and business people, you know, have their businesses changed under them. But this does create a reevaluation and a shifting, and it's going to refocus our collective thoughts. We're working right now, obviously, on State Street. Spent most of this meeting speaking to that. But the next step will be, as Rob's defined, you know, start envisioning the zoning. We have housing actually being positioned for council here shortly to look at housing coming into downtown. So we're going to see a natural evolution of downtown. The pendulum is going to start swinging the other direction, where we're going to see a resurgence of interest in downtown, not only what we're doing at grade on State Street and the outdoor dining and still to be evaluated, but over time, we're going to see housing developed into the downtown core. And that will be a substantive game changer. All of a sudden, you'll start seeing people walking their dogs and going out for coffee in the morning and going out for a walk at night, et cetera. It creates, as Rob defined earlier, you know, that 24, maybe not 24/7 activity, much a greater length of activity in the downtown. And when you have activity on the streets, people feel safer. And when people feel safer, they're more inclined to come out. And, you know, it's just been so great to see the families coming out to State Street, kids learning to ride their bikes, et cetera. So we're re-envisioning what downtown is for this community, and it's great to see. And we're obviously just in the beginning process to that, but I have very great optimism for the success of downtown. We're just going through a very difficult transition during a very difficult, you know, once in a lifetime pandemic.